Hi, Nader, and hi, Alex, and welcome to this Wicked series. And it's very nice to see you after a huge win and victory in the Zameer case. So it's nice. Nader, I know I've had you as a guest here before, but it's always nice to see you, especially after a very happy occasion. And Alex, welcome to the podcast. And it's very nice to meet you, and congratulations to you as well. And we are here to talk about this big case, the Zameer case. That was a very high profile case, and it got a lot of people talking. The legal community, all the lawyers are commenting about it because of all the issues that you guys had to encounter during this case and the trial. And we want to hear all about it. But before we get into what really happened, Alex, maybe you can start by giving us, our viewers, those who are not very familiar with the facts, a bit of background, factual background about the case.
Sure, thanks, Maya. So our client, his wife, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, and their 2-year-old son, Alian, went to downtown Toronto in 2021 on Canada Day to celebrate Canada Day. So they were hoping to see some fireworks downtown, walked around Nathan Phillips Square, went up to Yonge and Dundas Square, and on their way back to Nathan Phillips Square from Yonge and Dundas Square, they came across a man who had blood on his abdomen, looked like he had been stabbed. So they continued on with their night. Meanwhile, the stabbing victim that they had passed by went to Nathan Phillips Square, and somebody saw that he had been injured, called the police, and the MCU, Major Crime Unit from 52 Division, which are plainclothes officers, attended City Hall or Nathan Phillips Square to investigate. So this is sort of where the main officers who were the main witness officers at the trial come into play. So Officer Forbes, Officer Northrup, some other officers from the MCU unit, and Officers Correa and Pace went to investigate the stabbing victim. And so they interviewed him, got a suspect description from him, which was that the stabbing assailant was a brown male with a long beard, big hair, 180 centimeters, and medium built, and that the stabbing had occurred in the course of a robbery.
Okay.
So armed with that information, Officer Forbes and Officer Northrup decide to investigate the Green Pea parking garage. And the reason why they did that is because two other officers, the main officers Pace and Correa, had reviewed some surveillance video which showed that the stabbing victim had come out of the Green Pea parking garage at some point. And so they go down, they're looking around, they don't really see anything or anyone. They're on foot. They then go to P2 and they see our client, Mr. Zameer, who was getting into his car, and his wife was also there, and his 2-year-old. They had finished their night, they were on their way home, they hadn't seen any fireworks, they thought, it's late, let's go home. So the plainclothes officers who are on foot say, there's a brown male, we should go investigate him. This is Officer Forbes and Officer Northrup. They're on foot. Meanwhile, Officers Correa and Pace had gone into their unmarked van, which was parked on the street level. They brought it down to the parking garage so that they could sweep the parking garage to see if there was any, scene, any clues for their stabbing investigation. And they meet up with Officers Northrup and Forbes. And Officer Forbes says to them, there's somebody in the parking garage that we can see who's a brown male. And the suspect description was brown male. Now, it was much more detailed than that, but those were sort of the facts that she honed in on. So they start going on foot, Officers Forbes and Officer Northrup, towards our client, who's in his car getting ready to leave. Meanwhile, Officers Correa and Officer Pace slowly drive at the same time as Officers Forbes and Officer Northrup in the sort of adjacent laneway behind our client's car. And they arrive at the car at pretty much the exact same time. Officer Forbes, Officer Northrup bang on our client's window and say, "Stop," or "Get out." Meanwhile, the unmarked van is slowly driving and comes to a complete stop right in front of our client's car. And all of these officers are in plain clothes, and the car is an unmarked MCU van with tinted windows. Our client is sitting in his car, and he sees these two plainclothes officers who he has no idea that they're police.
And they were white, right? If I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yes. And he sees them come to the driver's side, knock on the window, and he thinks that they want money or that they're going to rob him, so he locks the door. That's when they sort of, everything changes. They start banging on the window, yelling, get out of the car." So he decides to drive forward to find the exit and get out. He didn't see the unmarked van, which was sort of at a crawling pace, about to stop right in front of his car. So he starts driving away and then comes to a sudden stop because he sees the unmarked van, and he hits the brakes right as the unmarked van is stopping in front of his car. And that's when everything changed for him. Before, it was just two people on foot who were knocking on his door asking for money. Now he and his wife think that it's a whole gang, and these are, it's like a mob, and they're gonna come try and kill them, basically.
And their kid
And their
is with them,
2-year-old.
yeah.
Yes, in the car seat in the back, yes. So his wife starts crying, hyperventilating. He thinks, what am I gonna do? These people are going to attack us. The two people who are on foot have followed the car up and are still banging on the window, yelling, "Get out, stop, get out, stop." So he does what anyone else would do, which is he reverses to get away from all of those people and from the car and to find the exit. In the course of doing that, Officer Northrup chased after his car. And so our client looks to the back over his right shoulder to reverses out of the parking spot, doesn't see that Officer Northrup has chased the car. And as he's steering to the right, out of the parking spot, Officer Northrup gets dealt what the accident reconstructionists call a glancing contact. So either he, loses balance, or gets contacted by the hood of the car, which is swinging out during the reversal motion, and he falls onto the ground right in front of our client's vehicle. Our client is still looking over his right shoulder. Mr. Zameer is still looking over his right shoulder, reversing, so he doesn't see or hear or feel any of this happening. When he turns back around to look forward, there is no one in front of the car, so he drove away, thinking that he had left the man and the woman, Officer Northrup and Forbes, and the MCU van behind. He goes over what he and his wife described to be what felt like a speed bump, which is what both accident reconstruction experts said at the trial it would feel like. They get to the exit. Officers Korea and Pace chase them down in the unmarked van, pull them out of their vehicle at gunpoint, and arrest Mr. Zameer. And in the course of that arrest, Officer Pace punches Mr. Zameer in the face while he's handcuffed. Then they announce themselves as police. And that's when our Mr. Zameer and his wife, Miss Sheikh, realize that this is the police, because then they're putting their vests on. There's uniformed officers coming down to attend to Officer Northrup. They had no idea that they had run over someone, and they had no idea that these people
were dealing with the cops.
Yes.
And I don't think we mentioned that, but my understanding is that they were still, Mr. Zameer and his family were new in Canada at the time, right? In 2021?
Yeah, they were new. They arrived in 2019.
Okay.
In January 2019. So they had basically a year in Canada before the COVID restrictions.
Right.
So they were quite new. I mean, the other really important contextual factor, and Alex's recitation of the facts was very thorough. And one just sort of additional contextual factor is this is July 1 and 2, 2021. And less than a month earlier had been that horrific attack against that Muslim family in London, Ontario, where that individual drove at this family who were visibly Muslim, and they were wearing, the women who were murdered in that terrorist attack, they were all wearing a hijab, and Mr. Zameer's wife Ida wears a hijab. And as you may know, Maya, I'm sure you do, that was a time when the entire Muslim community across the country was on edge.
Yeah.
It was something of tremendous concern. It's what we were all talking about, because it had been such a horrific attack, and it shook the fabric of the Canadian Muslim community, and so everyone was talking about it. So that was very much on their minds, and whether or not you are familiar with the Muslim community or not, I think most Canadians can empathize with the feeling of being in an empty parking lot late at night. And then I think also most Canadians can empathize with this idea that when you feel like your child and spouse, particularly your pregnant spouse, are under threat or under attack, I think most Canadians, and this is why I think we're seeing such outpouring of support for the Zameer families, that many Canadians feel like, if I felt like people were coming after me and I was with my spouse and my toddler, I would do what I could to try to flee as well. And this was a horrific accident. Like there are no winners in this case. Our client feels absolutely awful about what happened, but it was a horrific, tragic accident. And he had no idea, even after he was arrested and the people announced that they were, these officers announced that they were police. He had no idea until he was told, you ran over a cop, and he was shown the blood on the car. And
honestly,
that's when he realized that the speed bump was actually a human being.
Why would he even want to do this if he knows that they're cops, especially like if he knew that, like that, and does he even have a criminal record? This guy.
He's got no criminal record.
And
this
what
guy's
was his job before?
Yeah. He was an accountant. His wife was an aeronautics engineer from Malaysia, and he was an accountant. They had a young family, one small child, another one on the way. Absolutely zero motive to do anything,
and no connection to the to the criminal world. So
not at all, none whatsoever. And so, and this is something that the bail judge even focused on, and this is long before we had disclosure. The bail judge focused on there's zero motive whatsoever for Mr. Zameer to kill a police officer, let alone anyone, right?
Yeah.
It's there's no incentive for him to, or motive for him to do anything like that at all.
Well, that's the thing. And since we're talking here about the bail, Nader, I mean, this is a case that got attention right away and at the bail stage. And there was a lot of media coverage about what happened at bail because Mr. Zameer was released on bail eventually. And there was a lot of pressure here. So maybe if you can talk now about that stage of the proceeding.
Yeah, there was a lot of media attention on this case, sort of three distinct phases. Early on, there was a ton of media attention because a police officer died in the line of duty, and that's always tragic.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be a hot topic because thankfully, it doesn't happen very often in Canada that a police officer dies in the line of duty. And so when it happens, it's of course it's extremely tragic, and it's big news. So it was big news for that reason. And there was innuendo to suggest that this was some sort of deliberate act, and that this was I think there was innuendo to suggest that it was some sort of terrorist attack. Certainly early on, there were those whispers and that innuendo at the bail hearing. Although the Crown, to their credit, abandoned that type of suggestion or innuendo as the case proceeded. Presumably, they had run that theory to the ground and realized that this was a person with a spotless record and no associations whatsoever to any kind of criminality or even criminal thought. but early on there was that innuendo, and that was making waves on the more unsavory parts of the internet, and trolls and right wing publications on the internet were certainly suggesting that this was a terrorist attack. And his name was, he had a Muslim name, and it was a seemingly vile and incomprehensible attack on a police officer. And if it was deliberate, I suppose in that circle it stands to reason that this is an act of terrorism. So it was notorious in the beginning for that reason. And then there was a lot of media attention again because Mr. Zameer was granted bail.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of head scratching, I think, because bail decisions and reasons and the evidence, they're subject to a publication ban, which we tried unsuccessfully to have lifted. But so you have, it was an interesting situation because you have all these reporters who attended the bail hearing, who learned some of the real facts of the case, including the fact that this is a man without any criminal history who was out with his wife and kid celebrating Canada Day, and that there's no motive. So the reporters are at the bail hearing and they learn some of the true facts, but they can't report on it. And so all the public learns at that time is this man accused of deliberately killing a police officer is released on bail. And that leads, of course, to certain people in positions of authority, like the premier, like various mayors in the GTA, to spout some nonsense and denigrate the presumption of innocence and the right to reasonable bail by saying that it's, I think the premier said it's beyond comprehension that the person responsible for Officer Northrup's death could be granted bail. And so that caused a media storm for an entirely different set of reasons, with some people piling on and saying things consistent with what the premier and the various mayors had said, and others being very upset that these politicians who ought to know better would have the audacity to undermine the administration of justice, a highly respected superior court judge, and the presumption of innocence by spouting their mouths off when they had absolutely no idea what the facts were of this case.
Yeah, and what a lot of people who don't practice in criminal law may not know is that at the bail stage, the Crown's case seems to be at its strongest, because that's when you don't really have a lot of evidence yet. You don't have any expert reports. So the charges seem scary. You don't have enough of facts, to show that it could become a weak case. So bail, it always looks like it's scary at that stage. But I mean, that's why, thank God, we have bail, and thank God we allow people to get out and be released, because as the case progresses, then it weakens with time. But here, I mean, what's interesting is that even at that stage, the bail judge was already insinuating that it's not really the strongest Crown case for a murder case, right? So,
yeah, I mean, she did say that quite explicitly.
Yeah,
it looks like a weak case for murder.
Yeah,
she said it looks like a relatively strong Crown case for manslaughter at that time. I mean, that, and of course, that's before all of the expert reports were done,
starting to come.
Yeah. So, but at that early stage, even at that early stage, when the Crown's case is supposed to be at its highest, the Crown's case will never be any higher than it is in the police synopsis. We know that from experience, right? That is the highest level of Crown case. But even at that stage, Justice Copeland, now judge of the Ontario Court of Appeal, she commented that the case for murder was weak, and that's because it was flagrantly apparent at that stage that this is a gentleman with absolutely no motive to do anyone any harm, let alone a police officer.
Right. And then as the case was progressing and as the evidence was coming in, there were some expert reports that were coming in, like it just like the Crown case was getting weaker, right, with time. And so what was going on? Like, was there, I mean, it did end up going to trial though. And there were a lot of people who were commenting about the fact that why did we even have a trial in this case? So why did that happen?
Why don't you go first, Alex? We both have a lot of thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, so I want to hear from both of you.
I mean, it went to trial because the victim was a police officer. The deceased was a police officer. And I mean, that's the simple answer. I don't know. We obviously we tried to get the Crown to reassess and reconsider the strength of their case, and there just didn't seem to be any motivation to do that.
And what was their reason for that?
I don't know that we'd be able to do their reasoning justice.
But did they give any explanation? Like, did they explain why? I mean, they would not withdraw the charges?
I don't think it goes
reconsider.
beyond, a police officer died and we think we have RPC. And we would say, well, what do you mean? How can you say that? Well, we have these 3 eyewitness officers who say he drove at Officer Northrup.
Mhm.
And I guess they did. They had 3 officers who told a story of our client driving directly at Officer Northrup while Officer Northrup is standing up in the laneway with his arms out, bracing for impact. They told that story in the exact same way.
Right.
The trouble is they were all wrong, and they were all wrong in the exact same way, which sort of suggests that they're colluding and they're all lying. And we know that they are wrong because it's undermined. Their testimony is undermined by the video evidence as well as the expert evidence that said that there could not have been a direct frontal impact because there's no disturbance on the dust of the front of the vehicle or the hood of the vehicle, and no damage to the front of the vehicle that would be consistent with a head-on collision.
Yeah.
And then the video evidence. I mean, the video was low resolution footage, but it would have still shown the officer being hit head on had he been standing there. And so the officers were lying. And I think it became clear during the course of the trial, even if it didn't become clear to the Crown, it became clear to everyone who was following the trial that the officers were lying. But I guess pre-trial, the Crown was able to rely on the fact that they had these 3 eyewitnesses who, if believed, would give them evidence in support of a theory of murder.
So, but let's talk a little bit about this thing that you mentioned here, Nader, because in the practice of criminal law, we see that usually that police officers do lie. They're
Sure.
not always telling the truth. We know that, but I feel like sometimes the public gets surprised when we say that they do lie. And this is an example here where, especially when they start saying the exact same thing,
Sure.
I mean, there's something fishy here going on, right? Like, I mean, so, but if we talk here about that, like, so they were testifying in court and there was evidence, physical evidence that was contradicting what they were saying. So it's not just a he said, she said kind of situation. It's actually, there's like physical evidence that contradicts that. And I mean, this was also here an issue, right? Like that the police officers were lying in this case. And this is something that happened even in the Ghomeshi case where there was some collusion between some witnesses just because they really wanted him to go down. So it's not uncommon, and we're seeing this even in high profile cases. So, but here, obviously what's different is that we're dealing with police officers. And this is something that is a bit concerning, I think, for citizens who are watching to see this happen. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
So I don't think there's any question that these police officers lied, and then they lied about colluding. They did collude, and they lied about that too. I think that's now clear. It's not the first time. It won't be the last time that police officers lie in court. And that's concerning because those of us who work in criminal law, this is not new news to any of us. But I do think that the general public wants to believe that police behave honorably and that there's just a few bad apples, but in general, police behave honorably. And no doubt there are many honorable police officers out there. And in fact, in this case, there were honorable police officers who gave truthful testimony. We can
the experts as well.
Yeah, the expert. Yeah, the expert. I mean, he's a 25-year veteran of TPS, and he gave truthful testimony. I'm sure he's not cheering for our side,
No.
but he didn't want to lie. He didn't want to undermine his integrity or his reputation by lying, and that's a credit to him. But these police officers, I think, clearly lied, and there have been other cases where courts have found police officers to be misleading or outright lying. And I think the disturbing thing is that there are no repercussions, it seems, even when they are caught lying.
Yeah.
Forget about the situations where they lie and they get away with it. But when they're caught lying and when a judge calls them out for lying, why are there not repercussions? You know, if a judge calls out a lawyer for lying, you can rest assured that the Law Society of Ontario is going to be going after us, as they should, because when you're in a position of privilege, like lawyers are, like police officers are, you ought to be held to a standard of utmost integrity. And why police officers are it's not just that it's condoned, but the TPA president applauded the brave police officers who took the stand in this case. And that is disgusting. They ought to be ashamed of that. That should be something they should be addressing internally through their own discipline procedures. And if they don't, then I think we really need to rethink about civilian oversight of police services in this province, and whether we really do have meaningful police oversight, because we're supposed to have it, but it doesn't seem like we get much accountability.
Right. But on this thing, the theme of repercussions, I find there will be, but it's going to be on us, on the defense side. Like I find these high profile cases, unfortunately, instead of helping them, because it's a good victory for the defense, these cases, but then afterwards, the law doesn't seem to change in favor of the defense. It seems to go against, and it becomes tougher. This is something that we saw with Gomeshi, unfortunately. That sex assault law now is extremely tough, and it's a nightmare for many people who are charged with these offenses. So I just hope we won't deal with the same situation now, because it's already tough.
Yeah, I hear you. I think, though, I've been encouraged by the public reaction. There was, back when we first took on this case, we were getting hate mail.
Yeah.
How could you represent that guy? Now we're inundated with letters of support from Canadians across the country. Coast to coast to coast. We're getting from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all ethnicities. People are saying, my heart goes out to that poor family, tragic situation, but I would have done the same in his situation. I would have fled to protect my family. Yeah. And so, there isn't any kind of public uproar about the acquittal. The uproar has been in the other direction.
Yeah.
People are upset. They feel like their trust was broken because Canadians are trusting, and they believe that people in positions of authority, like the police, behave honorably. And when that trust is broken, I think Canadians are rightly so quite upset. So I'm somewhat optimistic that we will see change for the better, not for the worse. To give the I appreciate the example you gave, Maya. And I am no fan of that record screening regime that we now have in that area of criminal law. But right now the calls for reform are on police reform.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think the Canadian public, even if they're not well versed in criminal law, we don't like liars, and those police were liars.
Well, but also the other good thing about this case is that it is an example that shows that the system does work. It's not as broken as sometimes you hear people complain about the fact that our criminal justice system is broken. I mean, there are some issues, but actually when you let it work and you have this, and it's a credit to the jury trial system as well, because when they were listening to the facts and they applied common sense, I mean, they got to the right and correct verdict. So I think like here, this is more of a case where the system actually, if you let it work the way it's supposed to work, it works and it's a good system. Unfortunately, maybe the justice system some of the justice system participants sometimes don't want it to work the way they, like the way it's supposed to work, or they know where it's going and they don't like that direction. And this is, I think, what we were seeing a bit in this case, is it's just that some people didn't like how the system is working and they kind of wanted to change the outcome in a way, however they could, because they knew, like, I mean, it was obvious. Even the judge could, I mean, made the comment at the end, which is rare and we don't see in a jury trial.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that, but Alex, why don't you go first?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the justice system worked is putting it a little highly. I mean, our Mr. Zameer still had to go through this ordeal for, 3 years, and the bail hearing was very contentious. And, yes, the jury ultimately arrived at the right result, but, as you said earlier, Maya, this case should never have gone to trial, and it's like it should never have been a murder charge. So in that respect, I don't know how well the system worked, but I take your point that ultimately, the jury system, we have a lot of faith in our jury system, and this renewed my faith in the jury system, and they did arrive at the right result, and that's great, and that gives me hope. But I don't know that I would go so far as to say that this case shows that the system works.
But still, because sorry, it's just because here's the thing, because I mean, you need people to apply and to work in a system. Yeah. It's not just the system, it's also the people. And here I find in this case, it was really the people, because forget about the police, okay? The police, they charge, they always charge. But there's a second level of screening, which is the Crown's office. And the Crowns are lawyers. Police are not lawyers. So the Crowns, they know the law. They also there's a second layer where they can do something. And maybe the police were too involved. It was too emotional. It was one of them. So they couldn't, see it other than, oh, it was murder. But then the Crowns here, I mean, this is a question here. And we have a lot of cases at a lower level that are really garbage cases that shouldn't be in the system, shouldn't be wasting time, and they're causing backlogs. So
I think the way to think about a case and cases like this one, and I agree with Alex, like the system got to the right result. But whether or not everything that happened over the last 3 years should have happened is something I think one might disagree about. I think we have a system that is capable of working when all the right ingredients are in place. But for the system to truly work, you need an honest and ethical police service to investigate and not have tunnel vision. You need an ethical Crown Attorney's office that understands their role as ministers of justice. You need zealous and hardworking defense counsel. You need conscientious judges and hardworking judges. And you need, in a jury trial, you need a jury that's willing to do their duty. And if any of those pieces, any of those ingredients in this delicate balancing act, if any of those ingredients are missing, then there is going to be a risk of a miscarriage of justice. And so it's a system that can work, but it's fragile. and you need all of these players to do their part. And when one of those is compromised, I mean, it makes it that much more important that the other parts compensate.
Is AI the solution in this case?
That seems to be everyone's solution these days.
Yeah.
But no, I think AI will never be a substitute for human ethics and ethical decision making. I hope.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then thank God here that your client got the, the right result here, that it was clear to everyone who followed the trial, who was in the trial, and who was, like involved in it. It was clear that that was the right outcome. I mean, even the judge, and we'll get back again to this very unique situation where the judge even made a comment at the end in favor of Mr. Zameer. So first of all, like, for you guys, because this is something that doesn't happen very often, especially in these types of trials, jury trials, because the judge wasn't the trier of fact here. So maybe if you can tell us a bit more about that moment, and how does what is your client now doing? Like, and his comment after the trial was actually very touching, in that he forgave Canada,
Yeah.
which also shows a lot of maturity on his part, that he didn't hold any grudges, or he doesn't feel like he has this hatred for Canada. So it's like, so let's talk a little bit about that, because that was also very special and unique about this.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll answer the first part of the question about Justice Malloy's comments, and then Alex, you can fill in the listeners and about how Mr. Zameer is doing and his comments. So Maya, you alluded to Justice Malloy's comments after the verdict had been rendered, and I think it's important to for those who weren't following the case as closely. Justice Malloy was very restrained during the trial and very even-handed. I at times didn't know how she would have decided the case, because she was very even-handed. But after the jury delivered its verdict, Justice Malloy did look at our client and say, I apologize for everything you've been put through, or words to that effect. And you don't see that every day, as you point out, Maya. You don't see that every day. You see that most often in wrongful conviction cases, where the person has been wrongfully convicted and then they're exonerated. You see that most often then, and it's otherwise quite rare. But I think it was appropriate, and it's Justice Malloy. You don't get much more experienced as a trial judge than Justice Malloy, so. She deemed it appropriate to do so, and I think most of us would agree that it was an entirely appropriate thing for her to do it, and I think it meant a lot. It meant a lot to our client and his family, right, Alex?
Oh yeah. I mean, our Mr. Zameer and his wife are just two of the most genuine people, clients that I've ever had, but just people. They're really amazing, both of them. They're so compassionate. They are so genuine. And, Mr. Zameer's comments thanking Canada and forgiving Canada and saying, Canada is a good place after all. That was such a genuine feeling that he wanted to share, that he really wanted to share at that press conference. That's how he felt. He had said that to us before saying it to the public, that's really how he felt. And I think that really came across in the press conference. And I think a lot of people were very touched by that, myself included, that we could have put him through this ordeal, potentially life-ending ordeal, thankfully not. And still he would have the maturity, as you put it, Maya, and the empathy to say, this is a good country, the system worked, this is where we wanted to raise our kids, and now we know that this is somewhere that we can still raise our kids, and it's going to be a good place for us to live. I mean, it's going to be hard for them to move on, and I just think that they feel an immense sense of relief now that all of this is over, but now they have to rebuild their life, so I think that's what they're looking forward to doing.
Yeah, because I mean, for a lot of people who don't know, I mean, people's lives are really on hold when they're facing criminal charges, especially very serious ones. They can't work. Nobody wants them to work for them. And he was not a Canadian citizen, right? So, I mean, immigration wise, like
Yeah.
this is a nightmare for
Yeah.
anyone who's not a Canadian citizen. I hope he was at least a permanent resident, not a foreign national, because it's just like it gets worse when you have zero status here. But I mean, it's nice to see that he still has hope and faith in this country despite everything he's gone through, and I hope he still wants to live here, um, that he's not planning on going away, and that he will be able to start working. But it's I mean, just the trauma though is really, I mean, you guys lived with him. You've probably experienced some of this trauma. Obviously, it's different when for the person who's going through it, but lawyers also get to see the day-to-day pain that clients go through.
Of course. You know, some senior counsel who I've learned a lot from, some of them have said, you know, every murder case you do, it takes a piece of your soul.
Yeah.
And it's because you see what the stress that the people are enduring. Well, first of all, because in murder cases, there are no winners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Family of the victim, they will never be the same. The family of the accused and the accused themselves, they will never be the same either. And Mr. Zameer, he's a factually innocent person, to be clear, but he will go through life knowing that a man died under the weight of the car he was driving.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to bear, and that's something that has preoccupied him throughout. I mean, I've told this story, and it's true. When I first met him at Toronto South Detention Center, first question he asked was not, you know, can you get me bail, or how are you going to beat this case? The first question he asked was, you know, do you know how the family of the officer is doing? I feel so bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how he is, and that's how he continues to be. So it's going to take a lot to recover from this. I hope they can, but yeah, we don't often talk about the trauma of people who have gone through the criminal justice process, and what they do and what they can do to move on. But I think it's an important topic for conversation.
No, because it's all we believe the victims, right? Like it's always the focus is always on the victims more than the accused, but people don't realize that people who are charged with criminal offenses, really their lives are destroyed
Yeah,
during
yeah,
before they even get to trial. And of course, it gets worse if they're convicted, they're found
sure.
guilty and convicted. But even during that waiting period, where it's actually the worst because they don't know what's going to happen, everything is on hold.
Yeah.
Nobody can work. Some of them, I mean, even their families cut ties with them. So I hope
Yeah.
Mr. Zameer had support from his family back home, but
He's got a tremendous support system,
okay.
and I think that's what got him through it. I mean, he gives a lot of credit to Alex and me, and we're grateful for that vote of confidence. But his family is incredible. His wife Ida, and his sister Saima, who wasn't even living in Canada when he was arrested. She was living overseas. She's married. She's got 3 kids, and she left her life and moved to Canada with her 3 kids. Her husband stayed behind to continue working. She moved to Canada with her 3 kids to be his surety. And you know, even with our, you know, good legal arguments about why the case is so weak, you know, he never would have gotten bail without a
Without
really
a
strong
surety.
surety. And she was that strong surety, but she wasn't even living in Canada. She's a Canadian citizen. She did her university here. She's lived in Canada for a period of time, but she wasn't living in Canada at the time, and she came back for him. His mom has been here for the last few months just to support the family. They have an extended family in Canada and overseas who are very supportive. So there is a very strong support system, and I don't know how anyone gets through something like this without a strong support system. For those who do it, I'm amazed. But this was a very strong family.
Yeah. Well, and then there's this whole other issue, obviously. I mean, that's a different topic of bail, where there's this insistence on sureties when, like sometimes it's really, you don't need to have that surety, but it seems like in Ontario, especially, there's a very heavy focus on that. But I mean, I really hope that well, obviously he's happy with the result, but I really hope that he will be able to rebuild his life here, and that his sister can go back to her husband who is behind. Must be really hard for her as well. I mean, it was hard for everybody, not just for Mr. Zameer and his direct family, but for everyone else. And it must be such a relief for you guys now that this case is done, right? I hope you celebrated and were able to enjoy this victory, because it is a huge win.
Yeah, it's not celebration, Maya. As you know, it's more relief when you win a case that you feel like you ought to win, and where you're acting for a client who's factually innocent. So there was no celebration; it was just relief.
So, but one last thing before I let you guys go, that I wanted just to ask you about, because this is something that we see a lot in high profile cases. It's the media coverage, and in this case, at the beginning, especially. So at the end, the good thing, you had a happy ending. Things changed. The whole public reception of the case and perception changed, but that wasn't the case at the beginning. So how were you able to handle that pressure, though? Because it is, I mean, I know you try to ignore that, but sometimes it is difficult when it's a very high profile case. So just if you can just tell us a bit how you were able to deal with this media pressure.
Yeah, I mean, people will judge whether or not we did deal with the pressure well. But I can say, though, that I took tremendous comfort knowing that we knew the facts and that our client was innocent and truthful, and that we knew our client would be able to testify and tell a compelling story that was an exculpatory story, that his wife would be able to testify and tell a very compelling story. So that, I think, helped a lot. It also helped knowing that I think the media were aware of the true story because they were at the bail hearing and they couldn't report on it, but they were aware of the true story. And so they were already, it didn't come as a surprise to them when the evidence started to come out, and they were quite able to pivot quickly to showing that there was another side to this narrative. And so I think that helped ease the pressure quite early, because we weren't getting, inundated with the negative media portrayal throughout the trial, like many defense counsel have to deal with in trials, and then I've had to deal with the very negative media coverage throughout a trial. The media saw this case for what it is quite early during the trial, and I think it did help that these officers were such terrible liars.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully there will be some lessons learned for everyone like who was involved in this case. I mean, what we saw here is that unfortunately it was a case that wasted a lot of time for a lot of people, especially Mr. Zameer. I mean, his life, he can never get that time back. So I really hope that the case screening will be better moving forward, because we're dealing with a lot of backlog, and it's because we have some cases that shouldn't be in the system, shouldn't go to trial. And a guilty plea from a client is not necessarily the way to get rid of the cases. It could be by realizing that if this goes to trial, it's going to lead to an acquittal. So why waste time on it and get a plea?
Yeah.
So
No disagreement here.
Any final thoughts that anyone here wants to share before, or anything from your, like, what happened in this case?
Well, I mean, it's a good reminder, why presumption of innocence matters,
Yeah.
why the right to reasonable bail matters. You know, there were enough challenges in a case like this. I mean, even though we're dealing with a factually innocent client, as you know, my factually innocent or not, the criminal process is hard.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of challenges along the way when you have the entire apparatus of the state bearing down on your client. But it would have been so much harder to defend a case like this if the client was in custody for those 3 years.
Yeah.
For so much harder for so many reasons. And we've all done long trials where the client is in custody, and it just makes everything so much more complicated.
Yeah.
It interferes with the solicitor-client relationship, because you can't have a meeting in the comfort of your boardroom or your office. You can't take breaks for lunch. You know, you can't meet when it's convenient for you and them. It's these very regimented times, and you can't share multimedia the way you would in your own office. And then of course their mind isn't right, because the day-to-day stress of living in an institution messes with people. And so it makes it very difficult for people to prepare mentally for the stresses of a trial. So, but if we didn't have bail, and we didn't have reasonable bail, and we didn't get bail in this case, it would have made what is already a challenging case that much more challenging. And so I'm grateful that we have a bail system that sometimes works.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully it will continue to work. And I hope, and I want to be optimistic like you, Nader, and believe that things will get better after this case, and that this will actually make some of the participants of the system reconsider some of the things that they're doing. So hopefully we'll have to hope for the best, and we'll just end it on a happy note, because it's better to have a happy ending than a tragedy. So, and it was a happy ending in this case. So I want to thank you so much, you guys, for taking the time. I know you were very busy because of the case and having to deal with, like catching up and everything. So thank you for your time and for sharing some of what happened during the case. I know a lot of people will really want to hear from you directly, and it's nice that we got to hear from you today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Maya. Thanks for inviting us. We're big fans of WiCCD and what you do in the podcast. So thanks. It's a privilege to be here.
Thanks so much, Maya. It was really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, and good luck.
Thank you.